before you scroll, let me ask you something. What would you do if your own family stole everything your parents ever worked for, and the only thing they left you was an abandoned church everyone called cursed? Would you walk away, or would you open the front door? Emily Carter chose the second option. 72 hours later, FBI agents were surrounding her stepmother's mansion, a decades-old family secret, one forgotten church, and a single hidden letter would destroy a lie worth millions. But here's the crazy part. Emily almost gave up before she found the first clue, and if she had, the truth would have stayed buried forever. The morning of her father's funeral felt unreal. Rain poured over the cemetery as Emily stood quietly beside his grave, clutching a single white lily. People offered condolences. She barely heard them. Her dad wasn't just her father. He was her best friend, the only person she had left. A few hours later, she walked into Carter and Hayes' law firm. Victoria, her stepmother, was already there, dressed in black designer clothes. Perfect makeup, perfect smile. Too perfect. Emily noticed something strange. Victoria didn't look heartbroken. She looked relieved. The attorney cleared his throat. Let's begin. Emily took a deep breath. The Carter mansion goes to Victoria Carter. Emily blinked. The Carter Development Company goes to Victoria Carter. Her heart sank. The investment portfolio goes to Victoria Carter. The vacation home in Maine goes to Victoria Carter. Every word felt like another punch. Everything her father had spent 30 years building was gone, just like that. Emily looked down at the wedding ring in her hand. None of this made sense. Her father would have never left her with nothing. Never. Then, the attorney reached for one last envelope. He paused. There is one remaining property. Victoria laughed under her breath. Oh, please tell me it's that creepy old church. The attorney looked at Emily. St. Michael's Church is yours. The room went silent. Then someone chuckled. Victoria couldn't hide her smile. You actually got the church? Good luck selling that dump. It's probably worth less than the land it's sitting on. A few people laughed. Emily didn't. She quietly accepted the old brass key. It was cold, heavy, almost like someone wanted her to feel its weight. As she reached the door, the attorney called her name. Emily? She turned around. Your father left one final message. She held her breath. He told me, tell Emily not to judge her inheritance until she's opened every door. Emily frowned. What does that mean? The attorney slowly shook his head. I honestly don't know. But he made me promise I'd tell you those exact words. Emily slipped the key into her pocket. For the first time all day, she felt something she hadn't felt since her father died. Curiosity. 3 days later, she drove toward St. Michael's Church. The road was empty. Fog rolled across the hills. The old building stood alone, weathered, silent, forgotten. She stepped out of the car, looked at the massive wooden doors, and whispered, Okay, Dad, I hope you knew what you were doing. She slid the brass key into the ancient lock. Click. The heavy doors slowly creaked open. A cold breeze rushed past her. She took one step inside, then stopped. Fresh, muddy footprints covered the dusty floor. Emily wasn't the first person to enter that church. Someone had gotten there before her. Emily's heart skipped a beat. Fresh, muddy footprints. There was no way they belonged there. The church had been abandoned for over 20 years. So, who had been here? She slowly reached into her pocket, pulled out her phone. No service. Seriously? She let out a nervous laugh. For a second, she thought about getting back in her car, driving away, forgetting this place ever existed. But then she remembered her father's last words. Don't judge your inheritance until you've opened every door. All right, Dad. I'm here. She switched on her flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness. Rows of old wooden pews stretched across the room. Broken stained glass windows painted the dusty floor with faded colors. The place was silent, almost too silent. Then, tap! Emily froze. She looked around. Nothing. A few seconds later, tap! Tap! The sound came from upstairs. Her pulse started racing. Hello? No answer. Only silence. She slowly climbed the narrow wooden staircase. Every step creaked beneath her boots. The air grew colder. At the top, she found the old bell tower. Empty, or so she thought. Then something caught her eye. The massive bronze bell was buried in dust, except for one spot, a fresh handprint. Someone had touched it. Recently. Emily stepped closer. Carved into the wooden support beam were 7 words. Truth only speaks after the second ring. She frowned. What is that supposed to mean? It sounded ridiculous. Still, she grabbed the old rope. Dong! The bell echoed across the valley. Birds scattered into the sky. She waited. Nothing. Emily sighed. I can't believe I actually... Dong! The bell rang again. All by itself. Emily jumped. The rope wasn't moving. Nobody was there. A chill ran down her spine. Then, a beam of afternoon sunlight slipped through a cracked window, hit the bronze bell, and bounced across the room. The reflection landed on a stone wall. Right in the center, a tiny carved cross appeared. Emily walked over. She brushed away years of dust. Hidden beneath it was a tiny keyhole. Her eyes widened. The brass key. With trembling hands, she slid the key into the lock. Click! The entire wall groaned. Stone scraped against stone. A narrow passage slowly opened. Cold air rushed toward her. Nobody had been inside for decades. Emily swallowed hard. This has to be what Dad meant. She stepped inside. Cobwebs covered the ceiling. The tunnel led to a small stone room. In the middle stood an old wooden table. On top was a leather journal. Beside it, a sealed envelope. Emily picked it up. Across the front, written in her father's unmistakable handwriting, were 6 words. Emily, don't trust Victoria. Ever. Her hand started shaking. Her father knew. He knew everything. She carefully broke the seal. The very first sentence stopped her cold. If you're reading this, she already stole everything. Emily felt tears fill her eyes. Her father hadn't failed. He'd planned for this. She turned the page. But before she could read another word, bang! The church's front door slammed shut. Emily froze. Heavy footsteps echoed through the sanctuary. Not one person. 2, maybe 3. Flashlight beams swept across the floor below. Then she heard a man's voice. Quiet. Calm. Dangerous. She's here. Another voice answered. Find the letter before she does. Emily's blood ran cold. They weren't looking for money. They were looking for her father's secret. She quickly switched off her flashlight, clutched the envelope against her chest, and hid in the darkness. The footsteps were getting closer. And then one of the men stopped just outside the hidden passage. Emily didn't move. She barely breathed. The footsteps stopped just outside the hidden passage. One of the men whispered, check behind the wall. Another replied, if she found the evidence, we're done. Emily's heart was pounding so hard. She was sure they could hear it. She looked around. There had to be another way out. Then she noticed something carved into the stone floor. A tiny arrow, pointing deeper into the tunnel. She followed it. The narrow passage opened into a small underground chamber. At the center stood an old iron chest. No lock, just one sentence engraved across the lid. The truth belongs to the brave. Emily slowly lifted it open. Inside wasn't money. There weren't any diamonds. Instead, there was a hard drive, a stack of original property deeds, bank records, and a small voice recorder. On top sat one final envelope. It read, play the recording first. Her hands trembled as she pressed the button. Her father's voice filled the room. Hey, sweetheart, if you're hearing this, then I couldn't stop them. Emily covered her mouth. Tears rolled down her face. Victoria didn't just steal my company. She stole years before I died. She and our attorney forged my signatures. They moved company shares into shell corporations. Every document proving it is inside this chest. Emily looked down at the evidence. It was all there. Original contracts, wire transfers, signed agreements, even security photos. Then the recording continued. But that's not the biggest secret. Emily froze. The people chasing you today, they're not working for Victoria. They're working for the lawyer. Her eyes widened. The attorney, the same man who had read the will, the same man who gave her the church key. He wasn't helping her. He was making sure she found the evidence, so his men could steal it afterward. Emily suddenly heard voices echoing through the tunnel. They're down here. Flashlights swept across the walls. There was no time left. She grabbed the hard drive, the documents, and the recorder. Then she spotted an old emergency exit hidden behind broken stone. She squeezed through it just as the men reached the chamber. "She's gone," one of them shouted. Outside, Emily ran straight to her car. Instead of going home, she drove to the one person her father had trusted for over 30 years. Retired FBI Special Agent James Harris. James spent hours reviewing every file. Finally, he leaned back in his chair. Then he quietly said, "This is enough to bury all of them." A week later, the courtroom was packed. Victoria walked in wearing an expensive black suit. She smiled at Emily, confident, almost amused. Then the judge asked for the evidence. James connected the hard drive. The courtroom screens lit up. Hidden bank transfers, forged signatures, secret emails, security footage. One file after another, the entire fraud scheme unfolded. Victoria's smile disappeared. Then came the biggest shock of all. James played the final audio recording. It captured a private conversation between Victoria and the attorney planning to steal the Carter estate years before Emily's father passed away. The courtroom went completely silent. The attorney lowered his head. Victoria couldn't say a word. Minutes later, the judge ruled the entire inheritance had been obtained through fraud. Every stolen asset, the mansion, the company, every dollar was returned to Emily. Federal agents arrested Victoria and the attorney before they could leave the courtroom. As reporters rushed toward Emily, one of them asked, "So, what are you going to do with the mansion?" Emily smiled. Then she looked toward the hill, where St. Michael's Church stood beneath the evening sky. She softly replied, "Keep it." The church was the real inheritance. Months later, the abandoned church reopened, not as a tourist attraction, not as a business, but as a free community library and learning center. Above the entrance, Emily placed a small bronze plaque with her father's favorite words. "The truth doesn't belong to the richest person. It belongs to the one who never stops looking." And maybe that's why he left her the church.
If you love mind-bending mysteries, shocking plot twists, hidden secrets, and unforgettable stories, hit that subscribe button and join Kahani World. A new mystery is waiting for you in every video, if you're brave enough to watch.